Hi, I'm Venora. Do you know what it feels like to be laughed at by your entire family at your own sister's wedding? They mocked my cheap dress, whispered about how pathetic I looked in my wheelchair, then shoved me into a dark corner like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I sat there, smiling through tears, wondering how much lower they could push me. But I'll tell you this, by the end of the night, they weren't laughing anymore. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. I want to know. The drive to Napa Valley was beautiful. Rolling green hills, spring air crisp with the smell of wildflowers, but none of it made me feel lighter. My hands gripped my lap as the car approached the vineyard, its grand iron gates opening to a driveway lined with cherry blossoms. Everything screamed opulence, a picture-perfect backdrop for my sister's once-in-a-lifetime wedding. And me, I felt like I was entering enemy territory. I'd spent the entire week debating whether to come. Part of me wanted to decline, send a polite card and avoid the circus altogether. But then there was that other part of me, the part that still wanted to believe family meant something, that maybe my presence would matter. So I came. I told myself I'd sit quietly, keep my head down, and not ruin Corliss's big day. But as the car slowed to a stop, I felt the same knot of dread I always did before family events, the one that told me I was walking into a role I hadn't agreed to play. The valet smiled politely as he helped me out of the car and into my chair, though I caught that familiar flicker in his eyes, pity mixed with discomfort. "Enjoy the wedding," he said softly, and I gave him a small smile in return. It wasn't his fault. Inside, the venue was breathtaking. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed the courtyard, tables draped in ivory linens, crystal glasses catching the afternoon light. People floated around like they belonged there, dressed in designer clothes, sipping champagne, tossing air kisses like confetti. And then there was me in my simple navy dress, the one I'd saved up for, hoping it would look understated but elegant. My invitation had been a sign of what was coming. I'd kept it tucked in my purse, as if rereading it would make it sting less. Verona Maddox. Verona. Like I was some stranger with a similar name, an afterthought. And last on the list, right after +1, as if even my guest would rank higher than me. I'd stared at that card for a long time the day it arrived, wondering if it was a typo or if Corliss had done it on purpose. Knowing her, I could guess. A young hostess approached, holding a tablet. "Venora Maddox?" she asked carefully, as if unsure she had it right. "Yes," I answered. Her smile tightened. "This way, please." I followed her through the maze of tables until we reached one tucked behind a cluster of potted plants near the catering entrance. It was so close to the restrooms I could hear the hand dryers buzz every time someone walked in. I let out a quiet laugh. "Perfect," I muttered, earning a sympathetic glance from a passing waiter who quickly looked away. I parked my chair at the lonely little table, smoothing the skirt of my dress and trying to act like it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. They hadn't just placed me out of sight. They'd pushed me out of their world entirely. I told myself I wouldn't cry, that I'd gotten used to being the invisible one. But it's one thing to know your place in a family. It's another to have it displayed for everyone to see. I could feel people staring now and then, curious, maybe even sorry, but no one came over, not Dad, not Mom, certainly not Corliss. Why did I still come? I asked myself that over and over. Maybe because a part of me still clung to some version of family loyalty. Maybe because I thought that showing up, even when they didn't deserve it, proved I was the better person. Or maybe I just didn't want to give them the satisfaction of saying I didn't care. I reached into my small purse and found the handkerchief, white cotton with tiny embroidered daisies my mother had given me years ago, before she became the woman who only cared about appearances. Before she stopped seeing me, I held it tightly in my lap, as if it could anchor me through this circus. From my corner, I watched as guests lined up to greet Corliss. They gushed about her designer gown, about the perfect floral arrangements, about how lucky she was. My sister basked in it, beaming like she owned the day. And maybe she did. I glanced down at my dress, suddenly seeing it for what it was, modest, unremarkable, a reminder of how far I'd fallen from their world. My reflection in the polished silverware told me everything I needed to know. I didn't belong here. But that wasn't even the worst part of the day. It was only the beginning of their little show. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the vineyard garden, and the reception area was filling with even more guests. I tried to focus on the soft chatter and the sound of clinking glasses, but it was impossible not to notice Corliss making her way toward me. Her perfect smile plastered on, her arm linked with one of her bridesmaids. She walked like she owned not just this wedding, but the entire world. "Oh, you made it," she said, her voice sugary sweet but her eyes cutting right through me. "I wasn't sure you'd manage." She let her gaze sweep over me, pausing deliberately on my dress, then the wheelchair, and back up to my face. "Well," she added, "you look comfortable." Comfortable. That was her way of saying I wasn't good enough to be there. I could feel my chest tighten, but I forced a smile, the one I had perfected over years of these little performances. "It's good to see you too, Corliss," I said evenly. She leaned toward her bridesmaid, not even bothering to lower her voice. "At least she tried," she whispered, and they both giggled. Bless her heart for thinking that dress works for a wedding like this. I froze. The words weren't meant for me to answer. They were meant to remind me I was beneath them, an outsider in my own family. As if on cue, a cousin I barely recognized walked past, gave me a quick up-and-down glance, and muttered, "I can't believe she came dressed like that." They didn't even care if I heard. I turned away, gripping the handkerchief in my lap so tightly I thought the stitching might give. It wasn't just humiliation, it was the slow burn of being made into a spectacle, like my presence was some unspoken joke everyone had agreed to share. "Venora, come on!" My mother's voice sliced through the air like a blade. Marjorie stood near the photographers, waving her hand impatiently. "We're taking family photos." I rolled myself over, trying not to draw attention, but by the time I reached them, my father had already started arranging people. "Stand here, stand there," he instructed, shuffling people around like they were props in his perfect tableau. "Just sit over there, honey," my mother said without looking at me, pointing toward a bench at the edge of the setup. "We need a clean shot for the album." I blinked at her. "Don't you want me in the family picture?" "We'll crop you in later if we have to," my father muttered, his tone flat, like this was a perfectly reasonable compromise. The photographers avoided my eyes. I could tell they knew how wrong this was, but they weren't about to challenge the Maddoxes. I did as I was told, positioning myself at the very edge, half out of frame, literally and figuratively cut out of the family. When the photos wrapped up, no one said a word to me. I was just another task checked off the list. As they drifted back toward the reception, laughing and chatting, I stayed behind, staring at the ground. Why did I come? I asked myself that question for the 100th time. Loyalty? Hope? Maybe just habit. I remembered my late mother telling me once, "You don't need to fight to belong. Your presence is enough." At the time, those words had felt like comfort. Now they felt hollow. My presence didn't mean anything to them. I wheeled myself back toward my lonely corner, the one they had so graciously given me, as guests whispered behind their champagne glasses. I could feel their stares, the pity, the judgment. Corliss swept by again, her smile bright for everyone else but sharp as glass when she leaned down toward me. "Don't make this about you," she said softly, through clenched teeth. "Just stay put." I gave her a small, polite nod, but inside, I felt the sting of my invisibility sharper than ever. That was when it hit me. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me erased, and that's when I realized. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me erased. By the time the sun began to dip behind the hills, the celebration had only grown louder. Laughter echoed across the garden as servers weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stayed where they had left me, in my quiet little corner near the catering setup, close enough to see everything, but far enough that I didn't really exist to anyone. The glow of string lights above felt almost mocking, as if even they were part of the performance, adding warmth to a place that, for me, felt cold and hollow. The waitstaff passed by now and then, offering polite smiles, one even whispering, "Do you need anything?" I shook my head, grateful for their small kindness, but embarrassed that they were the only people acknowledging me. My own family hadn't glanced my way since the photographs. I fiddled with the handkerchief in my lap, my thumb tracing over the embroidered daisies like a nervous tick. I told myself to just endure it. A few more hours, then I could leave. But then I heard his voice. My father. Delmont Maddox stood just a few feet away, his back partially turned to me as he chatted with a group of his business associates. I recognized two of them vaguely from past family events. Men who had shaken my hand only after making a show of complimenting Corliss's perfect hosting. They were laughing now, easy and casual, glasses of bourbon in hand. "She insisted on coming," my father said, his voice low but not low enough. I froze, my ears straining. "Well, we had to bring her. Makes me look like a good father, doesn't it? Couldn't leave her locked away at home." They chuckled. One of the men clapped him on the back. "Good optics, Delmont. You've got that family man thing nailed down." Good optics. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My hand gripped the handkerchief so tightly my knuckles ached. I wasn't his daughter in this moment. I was his prop. A piece of set dressing in the perfect Maddox family picture. I stared down at my lap, willing the tears to stay put. So that's all I am, I thought bitterly. A trophy for his reputation. A decoration that proves he's compassionate. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to wheel myself over there and say something, anything, but I could already picture his response. He'd smirk, deny it, maybe even twist it into me being too sensitive. And in front of his colleagues, he'd humiliate me without hesitation. I closed my eyes, counting slowly to 10, trying to quiet the storm rising inside me. It wasn't just the words. It was everything leading up to them. The invitation with my name misspelled. The seating by the staff entrance. Being told to stay put like a child who couldn't be trusted not to ruin the big day. It all clicked. None of it was careless. And it was calculated. They wanted me here, but not as family, as proof. Proof that Delmont Maddox was a benevolent father, that Marjorie Maddox was gracious enough to include me, that Corliss's perfect wedding included everyone. I wasn't part of this event. I was their alibi. A shadow of movement caught my eye. Near the edge of the crowd, a man I didn't recognize stood watching me. Not staring, just noticing. He looked out of place, wearing a suit that wasn't quite in sync with the flashy style of the other guests. He glanced toward my father, then toward me, before pulling out his phone and making a call. I didn't know it then, but that small gesture would matter later. For now, I just sat there, clutching that handkerchief like it could hold me together, breathing slowly until my chest stopped hurting. Something inside me shifted in that moment, just a flicker, but it was there. That's when I knew, I thought, staring at my family as they laughed like I didn't exist. This isn't about me being part of them. It's about them using me, and I can't let them keep me in that role forever. That's when I knew. This wasn't about me being part of their family. It was about me being their prop, and I couldn't let them keep me in that role forever. The sky had started to change, melting into a deepening shade of blue as string lights blinked on above the garden. The vineyard, once glowing under the afternoon sun, now carried a softer, dreamlike glow. The music had shifted too. Lighter during the day, now replaced with something slower, more elegant, as servers ushered guests toward the dinner area. I remained in my corner, the same corner they'd left me in, silently watching. The buzz of voices wrapped around me like a swarm. Laughter, clinking glasses, conversations about vacations and promotions and how beautiful Corliss looks tonight. It should have been comforting, like the hum of a family gathering, but it wasn't. It was noise that reminded me how separate I was from it all. I was close enough to witness it, far enough to be excluded. Two women took the table near me, their sequined dresses catching the glow of the lights as they settled in. "It's really such a shame," one of them said, her voice carrying effortlessly over the soft music. "Poor thing. But at least Corliss got all the good looks." The other one chuckled, swirling her wine. And the husband? Can you imagine her ever having someone? No wonder she keeps to herself. My name wasn't spoken, but it didn't need to be. Their eyes flicked toward me once, quickly, like they were checking if I could hear. I kept my gaze fixed on my lap, fingers pressed against my embroidered handkerchief. I could feel the threads of those daisies pressing into my skin. It grounded me, kept me from shaking, from letting them see that I'd heard every word. It wasn't just what they said. It was how casually they said it, like my existence was an open topic for entertainment, like I was nothing but an unfortunate footnote to the Maddox name. A sudden, small voice snapped me out of my trance. "Hi." I looked up to see Corliss's daughter, a little thing with curly hair and frosting smeared on her cheek, holding out a half-eaten cupcake like it was some kind of peace offering. Her innocent smile almost made me forget where I was. Almost. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She tilted her head, studying my dress with the same blunt curiosity only kids have. "Mommy says you're poor. That's why you wear funny dresses." My breath hitched. She shrugged, unbothered, and plopped down on the chair next to me, swinging her little legs. "But it's okay. I like cupcakes too. You can have the rest of mine if you want." I forced a smile, my heart splitting in two. "That's very kind of you," I whispered, but my words felt hollow, drowned by the echo of what she'd just said. Corliss didn't just talk about me behind my back. She taught her daughter to see me the same way she did. Poor. Ridiculous. Less than. I stared at the child, not with anger, but with a kind of numbness that settled deep in my chest. She didn't know any better. She was just repeating what she'd heard. It wasn't her fault, but it didn't hurt any less. I turned back to the crowd, to my family, laughing, smiling, congratulating themselves for this perfect day they'd created. Perfect, if you didn't look too closely at the woman in the wheelchair pushed into the shadows. My reflection in the nearby window caught my eye. A ghost in a mint green dress. A prop in their perfect tableau. I whispered it so quietly no one else could hear. "I don't belong here, but I won't leave like this." It wasn't a threat. Not yet. It was a promise to myself. And that was the moment I stopped wishing they'd see me. I started planning how I'd make them remember me. The evening had crept in without me noticing. The garden had transformed again, now lit with twinkling fairy lights strung from tree to tree, candles flickering on the dinner tables, a stage set for a scene I wasn't meant to belong in. Guests began drifting toward the reception hall for dinner, leaving behind the laughter and chatter that had filled the outdoor space. I rolled forward slowly, following the crowd at my own pace, the wheels of my chair humming softly over the stone path. Inside, the hall was breathtaking. Long banquet tables adorned with crisp linens, centerpieces of cascading white roses, champagne flutes lined like soldiers at attention. The Maddox name was written all over this, grand, calculated, designed to impress. And my family was playing their parts flawlessly. Corliss, beaming as though she'd been born to be adored. My parents, arm in arm, looking like royalty as they worked the room. No one would ever guess the cruel words they'd left behind in the shadows. I sat off to the side, at the end of one of the long tables. It was quieter here. I watched them all with a kind of detached numbness, as if I'd left my body somewhere in the garden. The clinking of cutlery, the polite laughter, the wedding toasts. It all blurred together. "Venora!" A cheerful voice broke through my fog. I looked up to see Mr. Klein, one of my father's longtime friends, walking toward me with a warm smile. I hadn't seen him in years. He pulled up a chair beside me without hesitation. "It's been far too long," he said, patting my hand gently. "And I just want to thank you for what you did for Corliss. Really generous of you to help with that down payment. That house is perfect for her and Greg." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry?" He blinked, confused. "Oh, I thought, well, Delmont said you'd helped them out financially." "Used some of your inheritance, wasn't it?" He chuckled nervously. I suppose I wasn't supposed to mention it. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. My mind went blank for a moment, then flooded with static. My inheritance, my money. I forced a thin smile. Of course, I said quietly, my voice even though my chest burned. He patted my shoulder, oblivious, before excusing himself to join the others. I sat frozen, replaying his words in my head. Down payment, my inheritance, my father. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, but it all made sense now. Why I'd been asked to sign temporary financial paperwork years ago after the accident. Why I'd never been given updates about my trust. They hadn't just sidelined me, they'd taken from me. The room around me seemed to close in, air growing heavier with every breath. Later, as servers brought out the main course, I heard my father's unmistakable voice. He was standing a few feet away, holding court with a group of guests, his hand gesturing as he spoke. I wanted to do something big for Corliss, he said proudly. That car out there? That's my wedding gift to her. Nothing's too good for my little girl. There it was, the final nail. I remembered the luxury car I'd seen parked near the entrance earlier, the one that had made everyone gasp. I remembered the signatures they'd asked me for years ago, the ones that would only be used temporarily. My father hadn't given Corliss that car. I had. And he was parading it around like it came from his generosity. I clenched my embroidered handkerchief so tightly the threads dug into my skin. I wanted to scream, to roll up to him and demand answers in front of everyone. But I stayed still. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to be the embarrassing, emotional one in the room. Are you okay, miss? The voice pulled me back. I turned to see a young catering staff member, Leona, holding a napkin out toward me. Her eyes were kind, not pitying, which was a rarity tonight. I hesitated, then took it, loosening my grip on my handkerchief. She glanced at it. That's beautiful. Someone made that for you? My mother, I said softly. A long time ago. Leona smiled gently. Then hold on to it. Someone who made that for you loved you deeply. Don't let anyone here take that from you too. It was such a simple thing, but it felt like she'd handed me a lifeline. As she walked away, I stared at the napkin, at the handkerchief, at the people who'd stolen from me and dressed it up as love. I considered leaving then, getting in a cab, going home, locking the door, and never speaking to any of them again. But that would be too easy, for them. No. If I left, they'd win. They'd erase me completely. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. And just like that, I wasn't a prop anymore. I was a witness, and soon, I'd be their reckoning. The music had shifted, a livelier beat filling the reception hall as people began crowding the dance floor. Champagne flowed freely, heels clicked against the hardwood, and my sister twirled in the middle of the room like she was the queen of her own kingdom. It was easy to forget, for a second, that I was here at all, tucked against the wall, half hidden behind a decorative column. But I hadn't come this far to stay quiet. I watched my parents holding court at the family table, Corliss perched between them like a prize on display. My father's arm rested on the back of her chair, his head thrown back in laughter at some joke a guest had made. My mother leaned in, whispering something that made Corliss smirk and glance briefly in my direction, that familiar look of disdain curling her lips. I gripped the embroidered handkerchief so tightly I thought it might tear. If I don't speak now, I told myself, they'll think I'll never speak at all. So I rolled forward, each turn of the wheels deliberate, my path cutting straight toward the main table. My heart was pounding, but I forced my face into an expression of calm, the kind of mask they all wore so easily. Venora, my mother said, her tone dripping with that performative sweetness she saved for public settings. Darling, are you enjoying yourself? Everything is just beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful, I echoed, keeping my voice steady. I let a beat pass, watching their faces, before I added, I didn't realize my trust was so generous, or that Corliss's new car came from my inheritance. For a moment there was silence. My father's smile faltered, just slightly, but my mother was quick to fill the gap with a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. Oh, sweetheart, she said lightly, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. Don't make this about money. It's your sister's big day. My father leaned forward, his jaw tightening even as he kept his voice low and pleasant. You're overreacting, Venora. We've all supported Corliss. Why shouldn't you? It's what family does. Corliss tilted her head, that same smirk widening into a grin that made my stomach twist. Honestly, if you wanted to give me a gift, you could have at least picked a better dress for yourself first. The words hit me like a slap. I swallowed hard, willing myself not to react. They were expecting it. Tears, anger, a scene they could use later as proof of my instability. I wouldn't give them that. But before I could respond, a voice cut in from behind me. Hey, at least you're here, right? I turned slightly to see one of the groomsmen, tall, flushed from too much whiskey, his tie loosened and his shirt half untucked. He gave me a lazy grin. You're like emotional decor. He chuckled, and a few people at the table laughed with him, that awful, knowing laugh that told me I was the joke they'd all been sharing silently. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make them all feel even a fraction of what I'd felt since I arrived. But instead I smiled, a small, sharp thing that didn't reach my eyes. Of course, I said softly. How thoughtful of me. Their laughter faltered, just for a second, because they didn't know what to do with that. I backed my chair away from the table slowly, deliberately, their eyes following me as if I might do something dramatic. But I didn't. I turned, rolling back toward my little corner at the edge of the room, the embroidered handkerchief once again clutched in my lap. I parked myself near the window, the fairy lights outside reflecting off the glass, my own face staring back at me like a stranger. I felt hollow and heavy all at once, a storm gathering in my chest. They won't take my words seriously, I thought. Then they'll have to face my silence, and everything it's holding back. I stared across the room, watching them bask in their performance of the perfect family, their laughter ringing louder than the music. And I promised myself one thing: they wouldn't be laughing for long. And little did they know, my silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before their reckoning. The laughter from the reception hall spilled into the courtyard, clashing with the soft hum of the string lights above me. It felt surreal, sitting there beneath the glow of fairy lights while inside, my family danced and toasted as if nothing ugly had ever passed between us. I had been invisible all night, a prop in their show, but that invisibility suddenly felt like armor. Venora. I turned, startled by the voice. Benedict crouched beside me, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. He wasn't the kind of man who wasted words, which made what he said next land even heavier. He's on his way, he told me, keeping his voice low so it wouldn't carry. He heard enough. You don't have to fight this alone anymore. It took a moment for the meaning to sink in, but when it did, the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding came out in a slow, shaky exhale. Asher. Thank you, I murmured, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Benedict gave a brief nod and straightened up, slipping back toward the main hall. He knew better than to linger. I smoothed my dress, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must have looked after hours of being pushed around like furniture. I carefully folded the embroidered handkerchief and laid it across my lap instead of clenching it like I had all night. That simple act, the difference between gripping it for dear life and placing it neatly in front of me, felt like reclaiming a part of myself they hadn't managed to break. For the first time that evening, I felt grounded. Inside, my sister's shrill laughter cut through the din, followed by my father's deep, performative chuckle. I didn't need to hear the words to know they were about me. They always were. But now, the sting wasn't the same. Through the open doors, I caught Corliss glancing out at me, her brow furrowing. She elbowed my mother, who followed her gaze. Why does she look like that? I could practically hear Corliss's voice in my head. Like she's winning. My father turned in his seat, his face tightening when his eyes met mine. It wasn't often that Delmont Maddox looked unsettled, but I recognized it when I saw it. He didn't know what had changed, but he could feel it. Power shifting, balance tilting, control slipping from his grip. I didn't look away. I let him sit with the discomfort of not knowing what I was thinking, what I was planning, or who I might have spoken to. I don't need to yell, I told myself, repeating the words silently like a prayer. I don't need to cry. I only need them to wonder what's coming next. That was the thing about silence. When used right, it's louder than any scream. I stayed there, composed, almost regal in my stillness. I wanted them to feel the weight of my calm, to see that I wasn't the broken, begging daughter they thought they had cornered. I was something else now. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a sleek, black car pull up along the gravel path. My heart stuttered. Asher's car. It glided to a stop, the driver stepping out quickly to open the door. Even from a distance, the sight of it felt like a tide turning, like a storm about to break. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. My pulse quickened, my fingers brushing over the folded handkerchief. This wasn't relief in the way most people would imagine it. This was vindication. Inside the hall, the music dimmed for a moment as an announcement was made, the crowd's attention briefly diverted. But my family's eyes were still on me, their unease growing with every second that passed. Now, I thought, straightening my spine. They'll see me, not as their burden, but as someone they can't afford to dismiss. And when Asher walked in, the entire room shifted, though he hadn't even said a word yet. He had that kind of presence, the kind that made people stop mid-sentence without knowing why. The hall went quiet, conversations halting as heads turned. It wasn't dramatic or loud, it was deliberate. Asher moved with that kind of steady confidence that makes everyone else suddenly aware of their own posture. My father froze, wineglass halfway to his lips. Corliss blinked like she couldn't trust what she was seeing. Marjorie plastered on her hostess smile, the one she used when things were falling apart, but she needed everyone to think they weren't. Asher didn't even look at them. He walked straight toward me. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding myself until he crouched beside my chair. "Are you ready to leave?" he asked, his voice low, soft, meant for me alone. My throat tightened, but I shook my head. "Not yet," I whispered. He studied me for a moment, then nodded, like he understood without me having to explain. When he rose, he extended his arm, not as an offer of help, but as a declaration. This was solidarity. This was him saying, "I'm here, and they're going to know it," and they did. I could feel my family's panic building. Corliss's fake smile twitched. "Asher, what a surprise," she said, her tone dripping with forced sweetness. Asher turned his head, his eyes landing on her with the kind of quiet precision that makes people stop breathing. "Is it?" he asked simply. My mother jumped in. "Asher, dear, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" His voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than any shout. He stepped closer to their table, towering over them with an unnerving calm. "This is how you treat her? At your perfect wedding?" My father leaned back, attempting nonchalance but failing miserably. "Now, Asher, you know how families can be. She's overly sensitive." I felt my chest tighten at that. Overly sensitive. My entire life boiled down to those two words in his mouth. Asher didn't flinch. "Don't." One word. That's all it took to make my father's jaw clench and his glass lower back to the table. Corliss tried to laugh it off. "We were just having fun. You know how Venora can take things too seriously." He cut his gaze to her, and she stopped mid-giggle. "Fun?" He let the word hang in the air like a challenge. "You humiliated her. You pushed her aside like a problem to manage. Is that your definition of fun?" No one answered. The guests shifted uncomfortably. A few of them suddenly found their drinks very interesting. The ones who had whispered about me earlier wouldn't meet my eyes now. Then, without another word, Asher turned back to me. He slid one arm under my legs, the other behind my back, and lifted me like I weighed nothing. My chair sat empty, abandoned, as he held me in the middle of the room. And he didn't look at me. He looked at them, my parents, my sister, everyone at that table who had spent the entire evening pretending I wasn't worth their time. She doesn't need to say a word, Asher said, his voice steady but carrying through every corner of the hall. This silence says everything about all of you. You could have heard a pin drop. A guest gasped quietly. Someone else whispered, "Good Lord." My mother's painted-on smile collapsed, leaving only a pale, stricken expression. Corliss gripped her champagne flute like it could anchor her. My father's face turned the color of ash. The performance mask he wore for his business associates shattered beyond repair. And me? I didn't look away. I let them feel the weight of my silence, the very thing they had tried to trap me in all my life. Asher adjusted his grip on me, then turned toward the doors. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Each step was measured, deliberate, like he owned the space. And in that moment he did. I didn't look back. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. And behind us, the room stayed frozen. My family speechless, exactly as they'd left me all my life. The door closed behind us, muting the music and murmurs, and for the first time that night, I could breathe. Asher's hand rested over mine, steady and grounding, as we walked to the car waiting in the driveway. His driver opened the door, and soon we were sliding into the quiet luxury of the back seat. The vineyard lights flickered in the distance as the car pulled away, each passing moment putting miles between me and them. For a long time I didn't say anything. I stared out the window, watching the road wind through the dark, silent hills. My chest still felt heavy, but it wasn't the same crushing weight from before. It was different, lighter somehow. "You don't have to go back there ever again," Asher said softly, breaking the silence. I turned my head to him, the hum of the car filling the space between his words. "I know," I answered, my voice quiet but sure. "But this time, I left on my own terms." He gave a small nod, as if that was exactly what he'd hoped I'd say. The rest of the drive passed in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that gave me room to think, to replay the evening in my mind, their laughter, their cruel little comments, the way they pushed me to the edges of their perfect little tableau. And then Asher walking in, turning their world inside out without raising his voice. I realized something important in that car. This wasn't just about tonight. This had been my whole life. They'd raised me to believe I needed their approval, like it was oxygen, like I couldn't survive without it. But tonight, I learned I could. When we finally reached home, the city lights of San Francisco stretched across the horizon, glowing against the black water of the bay. Asher helped me inside, his hand warm against mine. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked, once we were in the soft lamplight of our living room. "I am," I said, and I meant it. After a shower and a change into something comfortable, I found myself at my desk with a pen and paper. My fingers hesitated over the blank sheet for a moment, but the words came easier than I expected. "Thank you for showing me exactly where I stand," I wrote. "I hope one day you see yourselves as clearly as I do." I folded the note neatly and slipped it into an envelope. Then I went to my dresser and pulled out the embroidered handkerchief, the one I'd clutched like a lifeline all night. It had been a gift from my late grandmother, a reminder of a time when family didn't feel like a battlefield. I stared at it for a long moment before placing it gently inside the envelope. Asher came to stand behind me. "Are you sure about that?" he asked, his voice careful. I nodded. "It doesn't belong in their hands," I said. "It belongs in my memory. I'm done letting them make it a symbol of pain." He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just placed his hand on my shoulder, a quiet reassurance that I wasn't facing any of this alone. Later, I stepped out onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against my skin as I looked out over the bay. The city was alive, lights dancing like tiny constellations, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not in that family, not in their expectations, but here, in my own life. They can stay silent forever, I thought. My life is louder than their mockery now. Asher joined me, leaning against the railing beside me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is walk away and let your silence speak for you.